In this episode of The Full Nerd, Core i9 for laptops and Hades Canyon. Oh, during this portion, the mics are still hot, by the way. Oh, wait. People don't know that. I just had to tell Mark. Welcome to The Full Nerd, episode 45, recorded on April 3rd, 2018. I'm your host, Gordon. I can't even get my name right. I needed some water. Gordon Maung with co-host Brad Charkis.
Hello, Internet.
Special guest Mark Hockman.
Hey, guys.
And Dan is here because Adam's on a beach.
Yep.
Dan Masoka.
Special producer
Dan Masoka. And I did not mangle his name. Very proud of that. Of course, the big news, if you have been looking at the front page of PCWorld.com or any place on the internet that cares about things that matter, Core i9 for laptops. Crazy, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Basically, though, Core i9 for desktop, got you crap loads of cores, right? 10 to 18 cores. These are not quite that. There is how many Core i9s, Mark? There's
actually only one Core i9, and it is 6 cores, 12 threads, which is pretty darn good, but not as good as a desktop, but still certainly what you would want for, I guess, a gaming laptop.
Right.
Yep. So should we just launch into it, I guess?
No, so I guess the one thing though is because for me, I think everybody's talking about Core i9, because it's such a hey, it's better than Core i7. But it really doesn't encompass everything, all the news that is today. That in fact, most 90% of what people are going to get will not be a Core i9.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Obviously we don't know what the Core i9 is going to be priced at. So the Core i9 is right now it's 6 like I said, 6 cores, 12 threads, 2.9 gigahertz base clock, 4.8 gigahertz Turbo Boost Tech 2.0, and that includes something called thermal velocity.
Thermal velocity.
We'll talk a little bit about later, I guess.
Should we have Dan? Can you pull up that first slide that has the audio listeners? We can try to walk you through it if you're listening in audio. Dan is going to pull up the slide, maybe.
All right, give me 1 second.
Hopefully it's not pictures of his dog. Is he? So that's slide 2.
That's slide 2? No, that's slide 1.
Give us the speeds and feeds if you want.
The speeds and feeds.
Is it this one?
No, that's us. Okay, that's okay. So this is the mobile processors.
Right.
Mark is going to run us through the ones that were announced today. These are technically all Coffee Lake H is the internal code name at
Intel.
Intel.
Yep, that's right. So, really the ones that you're going to want to focus upon, probably the Core i9, which I guess, going to be probably out of reach for most people as far as price is concerned.
It's going to be the tippy top 8950HK, Core i9 8950HK.
Right.
2.9 to 4.8.
Yeah. Now, I guess probably the more interesting ones are probably the ones that are down a little bit ways. You're not going to obviously buy a Xeon, but the Core i7s, the 8850H and the 8750H, both it's a 2.6 and a 2.2 gigahertz processor, boosting to 4.3, 4.2, 6 cores, 12 threads, 9 megs of RAM, or 9 megs of cache, I should say. Those are the ones that probably people are going to be buying. I think that pretty much, one of the things that we should note about the Core i7 8850H is the fact that it's partially unlocked. I don't think we've seen that before, and we talked a little bit about that offline. It allows you, it's not like a multiplier unlock. It gives you essentially 400 megahertz more, and that's it.
So 4 bins.
Yeah, 4 bins, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so... really, these are, just these sort of the second chat. These are more Coffee Lake processors. There's, we don't know the prices of these, but these are sort of the top line, top tier gaming processors. It's pretty solid stuff.
So these are all, for people who don't know, these are all 45 watt processors.
That's right.
For people who can't see the slide, obviously. 2 i7s 8850H, i7 8750H, give up maybe 100 megahertz on the boost end, 2.2 on the low end, and then 2 i5s, i5 8400H, i5 8300H. Both of those I think are actually pretty interesting. We can actually come back to us, Dan. I don't think unless people are taking notes here.
We have a couple of questions. Rutu is asking if the Core i9 has 1 hour battery life, and will it have quad channel memory?
No, it has but everything has 2 channels of DDR4 2066. The Xeons have ECC. Everything else does not.
Yeah, and that's typical the way they break it down. In Xeon, they unlock the ECC support.
Yep.
Consumers don't get it.
Right. But they all have
Dude, are there
Optane
even
memory
quad
support.
channel? Are there even quad channel laptop CPUs?
No, there
I don't
aren't.
recall saying that. Yeah, no.
Yeah, that's limited only to Core i9 on desktop. And clearly that I think there will be some disconnect there because when you think about Core i9 on the desktop, you're looking at like $2,000 18 core repurposed Xeon, right? These are not quite that.
No, I'm not sure what the prices will be on these. We don't know.
So yeah, the core count. Sorry, go ahead.
Looking at these, interestingly to me, like the big deal about Core i9 on desktop is the fact that it has so many cores. But looking at this chart, it looks like the Core i9 mobile chip is basically just a faster Core i7.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. So basically higher clocks is a message. It's not higher thread count. Mm-hmm. But you get thermal. I can't get it right. What's it called? Thermal velocity boost. Thermal velocity boost, folks.
That sounds pretty good.
It's got more of that.
Yeah,
more
exactly.
thermal velocity boost.
So what is thermal velocity boost? Should we talk about that?
Yeah, I think we definitely should because it did come up at the briefing from Intel.
So this is only a feature of the 8950HK, and it maxes out after 4.6 gigahertz. That's the turbo boost. But what happens is if you have a processor that's sort of in I don't want to say a cooled state, but a cool state, you'll sometimes get 200 megahertz more. And the thing of it is that normally we talk about, we expect these things to sort of kick in. This is like an optional boost. I mean, it'll happen if the conditions are right. Otherwise, you won't get it. But basically what'll happen is it'll boost a single core by 200 megahertz, or it'll boost all of the cores by about 100 megahertz. And this is something we haven't seen before. But, you always wonder about, like, how is Intel going to eke out more clock speed. And this is sort of like, kind of feels like they're kind of trickling out, like running out of room a little bit. But I mean, you are getting a boost in this regard. And so if you've got a processor that I guess is either cooled or just, again, in a cool state. Then
I think their official, the line of demarcation is if the processor is under 50C.
That's right. Yep.
You get your
50C.
thermal. Yeah, 50C.
Yeah.
Seems pretty cool, though.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I do think that's, and I will say we probably saw 10 or 11 or 12 different core, Coffee Lake laptops at the demo.
Mm-hmm.
Only the biggest and the burliest of those were probably going to get the Core i9s,
right?
Because you really needed the multiple heat pipe, the really great big berthas that could disperse that heat, so you could hit 50C and really get your boost. Because otherwise, if you're not getting that 100 or 200 megahertz up clock, then you're not getting that much more over i7.
We have confirmed we have 3 laptops on all the Core i9. It's a Dell Alienware 17-inch, the Asus ROG G703 17-inch, and the MSI GT75, also a 17-inch.
Okay, yeah. And these are all,
I'm very
again,
curious to see how that winds up, because you would think that this would be used for gaming, right? Like, let's jack these and do gaming. But 50C is ridiculously cool for a laptop to be running during games. I'm doubtful that this will have much effect on games as a result.
Well, but it is just, in most games are single-threaded, whatever, Peanut Gallery, most of them are single-threaded. If you have a dedicated heat pipe or heat pipes for the CPU, you might be able to hit it. I mean, if they've designed if they engineer the cooling right, and you separate the CPU from the GPU from heating up everything, then you might be able to hit it.
Yeah, but I agree with Brad, though. I mean, it seemed like they already called it an opportunistic type thing. And it did seem a little bit more on the marketing side than actual something that would happen in the real world.
Yeah.
So you just have to play outside in the Northeast right now.
There you go. Exactly. That's right. That's right. It's a winter processor.
But, they are making some pretty bold claims. I printed out the slide here because, I like my printouts. But where the hell? Where they're saying it probably didn't print. Like the one thing I wanted to print. They're saying, this is not even the one, of course. Yes, it did not actually print the one I wanted. Actually, that other slide. Actually, Dan, the one that you pulled up for slide 1, that would have it.
All right.
That has the turbo boost. But the performance claims, they're claiming, pretty...
Oh, right.
I mean, they're claiming to really. I don't know if Brad can see that or not, and I can't read that
I've
on
read
the
these
screen.
decks, and I have comments once you're done.
Yeah.
All right. Should we yield the floor to Brad? I haven't actually because I can't find it.
They do have really crazy performance claims. Something like 29% better versus a 3-year-old system, 68% faster photo editing, et cetera, et cetera. And it looks really impressive at first glance, but if you dig into the system configuration numbers, the new Core 8th gen that's being used is not just the new CPU, it's with Optane memory. And the system that they're comparing it against is only using a standard hard drive, not an SSD. So these performance claims that I see in this deck, take that with a grain of salt.
They're cheating.
Well, I mean, there are some games that are streaming. I'm sorry, did we cut you off? Wait, are we losing
No,
Brad?
I'm good.
So I mean, they're saying 41%, and they're saying so a Core i9 8th gen will give you 41% up to, of course, 41% better frame rate,
Right.
than a 7th gen i7, assuming that's the same GPU in both. That's pretty bold, but I don't think the Optane is going to be the one, unless it's something that is streaming. I mean, do you think that's
Optane
what
can
they're
make a
saying?
big difference in performance. Yeah, if you go down to the, like, I have this full deck, you sent it around. If you go down to the bottom, it'll say the comparison system just has a standard SSD,
Right.
or HDD, and this specific 8th gen model is using Optane memory module, and you tested it. It can make a big difference in performance.
Right. But certain games that are streaming in, right? That was I think we've seen that. So if you are playing a game where you're having to stream in assets from your hard drive, it definitely
Open world games
can make a difference. But at the same time, if the thermals are right, and what was the previous 7th gen quad was, what did the top out at? Maybe 4.2, maybe 4. It wasn't even really 4, right? 4 gigahertz in single thread. It was fairly
Something
low.
like that.
It wasn't. If you're really getting up to an 800 megahertz overclock, well, a higher clock in single threaded loads over a previous one that could hit, say, 3.8 gigahertz, you do see a very decent amount of frame rate increase in certain games that are not GPU limited, right? So
Yes.
some of it could be real, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I'm not calling it BS. I'm just saying that this was, as always with these press marketing slides,
Sure.
these are specifically selected to
This is
show
true.
maximon performance
Right.
versus suboptimal older systems.
Yes,
Right.
and
So-
definitely, I think if you're going to go out and play Far Cry 5 on a laptop on an i9, you're not going to see 41%
Right.
frame rate
Right.
increase over current 1080 versus next gen 1080 with the i9. It's not going to be 41% faster.
Should we talk about a little bit about since Brad brought up Optane, should we talk a little bit about how they're going to be telling you if Optane is in the system?
Yeah, that's actually very interesting. But actually before that, I just want to talk about that one partial unlock
I know,
thing.
this is
So like that i7. So Mark mentioned earlier, the Core i7 8850H is partially unlocked, which they've never done before.
No.
There have been, we've seen this on desktop where you could, you have lower end chips that were unlocked. Not everything was unlocked. You couldn't say overclock memory or certain knobs you couldn't, but it was kind of unlimited. But this is the first time I think we've seen them say only 400 megahertz overclock.
Yeah. And they didn't even make it clear during the presentation. I had to go back to them and ask them about that. So
It makes you wonder if they're planning on if this will be an approach in the future, because
Yeah.
I kind of wonder if Intel's going, AMD has a really good message, hey, you want to know which Ryzens are unlocked? The simple answer is all of them.
Right.
So with our parts, we sort of have weakness there. People want cheap parts that are unlocked. So we still want to market on it. So how can we do this? So
Yeah,
I do wonder if we're going to see that in desktop too.
did kind of feel like a trial balloon.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm not a fan.
Not a fan of the partial unlock.
The idea, it's like video game DLC, but for unlocked multiplayers in your CPU.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Well, at least it's not like you unlock it by paying more in real time,
That's also
right?
true.
So, which is something that has been played with in the past,
Right.
with cash.
One thing I find interesting about all the laptops, we have a ton of laptop coverage on the site today, by the way. One thing I find interesting is that, from what I could tell, the vast majority of the new systems announced had the Core i7 8750H, which isn't partially unlocked, isn't fully unlocked anyway. So
Right.
I'd expect to see a lot more of that chip
yeah.
in most future laptops.
So the interesting thing is, I would expect the 8750H to be kind of the equal, but the 8850H was in all the demo units. So,
Yeah.
I mean, clearly they're probably not going to overclock much, but maybe some of the some of them might overclock a little bit. Maybe even 2 bins is not bad. Hey,
Right.
for free is free, right?
Yep.
One thing I do want to mention before we get too far, I want to point out for budget gamers, very important fact that I think is very interesting, is at the low end. So like this i5 8300H basically replaced an i5 whatever 7300H or kind of that range. So right now, for your budget gaming laptop, which is to me about $1,000 for the 1060 Max Q part,
Yep.
you're getting a quad-core Kaby Lake quad with no hyper-threading. With Coffee Lake, what you're going to get is a quad-core with hyper-threading, which
Huge difference.
huge difference. In fact, I was looking at the base clocks are lower on the 8300H than a current 7700H Q, whatever it is, but the turbo is a little higher.
Yeah.
So it is this new i5 in Coffee Lake, even though it is only a quad core, is likely going to be faster than what you currently get out of a top end gaming laptop.
Right.
Right. So that's actually kind of a plus.
If you're interested in the i5, that's the Acer Nitro 5 and the Dell XPS 15. Both those.
Okay, so they're going to have it as well. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So we have a couple questions regarding Optane. The first one is on where is this? On YouTube, which says, why can't they use Optane for integrated graphics memory? And then on Facebook, we have, is there going to be a mobile Optane?
Oh, well,
Yes.
in fact, Mark, I mean, we're here. In fact, that was part of the big announcement. It's like
Yeah,
we
exactly.
got mobile Optane now, right?
Yep. So, I mean, let's, I guess, just talk a little bit about that. So, Intel's migrating Optane into the mobile space, and they're pushing Optane memory, which is still one of those things that's kind of confusing. But what they're trying to do is simply brand it, because they have the Intel inside, and they have the stickers on laptops that sort of tell you obviously what processor it is. But now they're going to be using this odd plus designation to tell you what's going to be on if you have a laptop with Optane memory inside. So in other words, you have traditional i5, i7, i9, or i3, i5, i7, i9 now. Now you're going to have i5 plus, i7 plus, and i9 plus to sort of tell you that Optane memory is there in the system. And like Brad said, that's how we're getting those faster performance numbers. So, I mean, if you look at it from a branding standpoint, you say, oh, the good, better, best thing from i3, i5, i7 was great. It was understandable. Then they added i9. Well, now they've kind of blown that up one more dimension, where they've sort of added the plus. So you have a good, slightly better, best, whatever it might be. But yeah, so I don't know. It's kind of an odd way to tell people about it, because I don't think that the plus tells anybody anything about what's inside the thing.
Well, it tells you it's plus, Mark.
It's a plus.
It's
but I mean,
plus. I
what
don't
does
want
that mean?
minus.
Yeah. What does that mean?
Core i7 minus.
Exactly.
That's like a Core i6.
I mean, Intel already has challenges enough explaining what Optane is, and now you're putting Optane memory in the mobile space, and you're putting this branding and designation to it. I think maybe over time people will get it, but I think from the get-go, people are going to be like, what is this? What am I buying?
I think that's kind of smart on their part for normal people who don't follow PC World.
Oh, I agree.
From
the pluses
like
are
if you
cool.
walk into Best Buy and you're like, hey, this is a Core i7. What's a Core i7 Plus? And then the salesman would be like, well, let me tell you about that.
That's a plus.
I hope he would.
If it were bad, we wouldn't put plus on it.
Yeah.
Although I got to say, so people need to know there's no difference. Because when they first showed us this logo at the briefing, everybody was like, wait, is this a different SKU?
Right.
Different like bin? It's like, no, it's exact same
thing.
Core i7, Core i5, but it tells you that certain device or laptop or desktop that has Optane support.
Yep.
Or it has
So what is
Optane
Optane?
memory.
I don't think that's common knowledge at this point. So can you just give us a TLDR on that?
So it's basically Intel and Micron jointly developed a 3D super whiz bang amazing, non-volatile memory.
That's right.
That is the easiest way to think of it is the performance of it's halfway between RAM and an SSD. And it is wickedly fast. And right now in SSDs, it's incredibly fast at really low Q depth workloads. It is pretty amazing stuff. It's also extremely expensive compared to what you're getting out of an SSD NAND. And it was also first introduced with Optane memory to use to cache a hard drive.
Right.
And that is actually
that's what this is.
Right, which is what they're going back to for this.
well, they're both. I mean, so the Optane, I think the plus could mean, hey, you're getting a gaming laptop with an Optane drive as a primary drive.
Yeah.
And it also means you might also get it with Optane memory, which I got to say, and this is one thing I want to point out. I think Optane memory, as for an enthusiast, made no sense.
Right.
For a budget person, yeah, it's way better than a hard drive. Believe me, it's
Right.
way better than a hard drive. But what I think is really going to appeal to enthusiasts now is you can use it for your data drive.
That's
right?
the thing we got to talk about. Yep.
Right, so you can have a hard drive, or you can have your gaming system or a laptop where you boot off of your primary SSD, whatever it is, a 512 gig or even 256 gig, and then you have your big fat hard drive with all your
Right.
games on it, and you can use Optane to cache that drive.
Right, which makes a lot of sense because I mean, yeah, you've got an SSD that you want to store your operating system on, but yeah, we can't run games off an SSD. I mean, you
Right.
can, but you need a truckload of money. So yeah, everybody's got like a 6 terabyte drive or whatever it might be to store your games on, and yeah, it's slow. I mean, it's not slow, but it's slower.
It's slow.
Yeah, it's slow. And so yeah, I mean, they see Optane as sort of the way to accelerate that, especially if you're playing the same game, over and over and over. So it's going to just obviously load levels quicker, load the game quicker, that type of thing, which is smart. I mean, I think it's funny because I mean, as an Xbox user, I'm sorry, you'd want that on the console side as well. But of course, this is an AMD owned console space, so you can't do it with that.
Yeah, I gotta say, yeah, and Optane in a game console would greatly improve their SSD performance. Oh wait, none of them use SSDs. I mean, where's Elena when I need her to troll
Yeah,
Elena?
it's all hard drives.
Although,
So I got a question. So that's new, right? Like when Optane memory first came out on desktops, you couldn't use it with an SSD. You had to just use the cache and a hard drive, right?
you could use it to cache an SSD, which of course,
Right.
was.
But you couldn't use a secondary drive.
No,
It had to be one primary drive.
Yeah.
So this is a new capability. Is this coming to desktops? Do you know?
Yes.
Or is this just only announced for this at this point?
It's mobile. It's basically it's a feature if you currently can support Optane. If you have a chipset that supports it, you can, with the latest drivers, you can support caching a data drive. So they're backdating it to current Z370 boards that have Optane, probably Z270 that has it.
Yep.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah, it's
isn't
nice.
it?
Yeah,
It's
I do.
really.
Yeah, I think that's a nice feature. I really do. Yeah.
Yeah, 6 terabyte drive with a 32 gig Optane drive, which is about $70.
Yeah.
The first time you play that game, it's going to be hard drive speed because you got to cache it to the SSD. But the second time you play it, it's going to be loading at Optane speeds, which is just it's a great feature. It's a really good feature.
Yeah, it's a smart move.
Yeah, I really like that. Although I got to say, for people who like to, if they're put on your aluminum foil hat, I could also see where Intel's going with Core i9 Plus or their Plus series. Optane is a wholly created technology by Intel and Micron. They control it. Their ultimate goal is to take Optane and put it into a DIMM slot, right?
Right.
They're not going to likely give that to the industry initially. They may later on, but they're not going to hey, AMD, here's how you integrate Optane into your Ryzen chips. They're going to be like, no, we want you to buy our stuff. You get a Core i7 Plus that has Optane in a DIMM slot, and we're talking about 3 or who knows how far down the road. It's going to be a really big advantage for Intel eventually.
It's a really interesting. I mean, we have some really interesting strategies of vendors trying to create effective lock-in.
Right.
I mean, you guys discussed the NVIDIA stuff a while back, which is a separate issue, but we have Intel doing one thing and then NVIDIA doing its thing. AMD really hasn't done anything like that, but I mean, again, we're starting to see Intel say, look, here's the advantage of an all-Intel system. Why would you consider the other guy?
Right.
Yeah.
So we have Adam Patrick Murray on YouTube saying console fan here. So I thought he was on vacation, but I guess, who knows? And then also,
What better way to relax than to kick back and watch the full nerd?
There you go. Exactly.
From the beach.
Yes,
and since you guys brought it up, there are questions about AMD. So one is, when do you think a 6-core mobile AMD will be
I was
released?
thinking about that on the way in. Yeah.
Of course. And also, are we going to see Threadripper and Ryzen high-end laptops in non-US markets anytime soon?
That's a big issue. I wasn't sure.
Threadripper in a laptop?
I don't know the answer to either of
Yeah,
those.
exactly. Yeah, but I was thinking about how does Intel respond? Or sorry, how does AMD respond to like mobile Ryzen and so forth?
I don't. Yeah, and that has been a problem for them. We've so far only seen APU. I know their roadmap does have more official higher end parts.
Yeah.
I would say, AMD's got a lot on its plate. I wouldn't expect it till, next year, honestly. Clearly they have giving you more cores per socket is their thing. I would expect them not to do 6 cores. I would expect AMD to say, hey, we're doing 8 core, whatever, right? So
They
they're
might just want to stick to their sweet spot right now.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if they try to do too much, it's going to be hard, right? So, and it is breaking into mobile. And I think we said this a while ago. Desktop's one thing. Intel, let's be honest, doesn't care about desktops that much. Doesn't move a lot of product. Doesn't move a lot of volume. Laptops and servers, they will defend like it is, the very end, right? They will defend that tooth and nail. So they are this is where you're going to see Intel fight as hard as possible. It's in laptop and servers.
Yep.
For AMD to break into that market, it's going to take a lot more.
Yep. Should we use that as a segue into talking about desktop stuff?
Oh, we should actually.
Yeah.
Do we? Let's take a couple of minutes to talk about desktop.
Yeah. So we have new Coffee Lake desktop CPUs as well. And these aren't really, I don't know. I mean, they're from the speeds and feeds, they're not really all that hot.
There we go.
Correct me if I'm wrong. We start out with a couple of standard power chips, the 65-watt chips, 162. Core i5 8600, the Core i5 8500, then Core i3 8300. So we have the Core i5 8600 top is a 3.1 base, 4.3 boost, 6 cores, 6 threads. So, that kind of tells you right there that you're not talking about like the top of the heap here. Ditto for the 8500 and the 8300, 6 cores, 6 threads, 4 cores, 4 threads for the 8300. And then you go into the low power stuff, which is also a little bit more interesting. There you've got a 6 core 12 thread part, the 8700T, and that's 2.4 gigahertz boosting to 4, 12 megas of cache, and you see the prices down to the right hand side, 213 for the 8600, 303 for the 8700T, and then straight down from there. Again, all 2 channels, DDR4 2666. And you can just sort of look at them on your own leisure. What's new about these from Intel's perspective is that they also have 4 new chipsets accompanying them, which is nice because we have a little variety.
Oh, we should. I think we have the chipset slides. So
Is that the 300 one?
Yeah, 300.
The 4 chipsets,
which is the big deal here.
To me, that's the bigger deal.
Yeah,
to me, I consider these CPUs to be like
Brad's
lineup filler.
Yep, Brad's right.
But the chipsets are the bigger deal.
Yeah, exactly. So quickly, the chipsets, I mean, you can look at the speeds and feeds there. One thing that Intel's really pushing here is the fact that these now have act like smart speakers. They have, what's the term that Intel's using for this?
Smart sound.
Thank you. Well, no, not quite that. I don't think of.
Which one then?
Active voice.
No, it's
Thermal. Super
Thermal
power.
burst
Hang on,
voice.
I'll find it.
All right, I have it here.
Modern Standby. That's it. It's like Modern Family. Modern Standby, which basically just puts it in a low power state, allows it to respond to voice, which again, that means you can go ahead and yell at it like a smart speaker. Intel now is really actively promoting both Cortana as well as Alexa. Alexa is coming to the app. Microsoft actually is integrating Alexa into Cortana, although that's still sort of TBD as far as when it's going to come out. But again, that's the idea behind this. And then, like Brad said, let's talk a little chipsets again a little bit more. That's sort of the key.
Yeah, well, that's the big deal to me because like when the first wave of these Intel 8th-gen chips came out with the 8700K and everything, the 8700K kicked butt. Put it in a Z370 motherboard. It's a great chip. But the problem is those enthusiast class Z370 motherboards were the only motherboards released at the time. So if you wanted to buy like a Core i3 chip that costs $110, you'd have to buy a $130 motherboard to put in, and that made no sense.
Yeah.
So they're releasing, I forget, 3 or 4 new chipsets today. The full lineup, what you would expect from a desktop processor generation, from budget stuff to right below the Z370. So there's a whole bunch of options.
And that H370 is going to appeal to most budget gamers.
Right.
Single by 16 and all the other good stuff. Integrated USB 3.1 native and 802.11 AC sort of kind of.
Again, Optane.
And they all support Optane except for one bizarre chipset.
H310, the cheap one.
Right.
That must be almost like an older product that they just relabeled as a 3 series, I guess.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually trying to find. I thought they must have slipped in like a new Celeron. I swear.
No, it's not there actually. Yeah, that's a good point.
All of these chipsets, the new ones, they don't support overclocking or DD4 overclocking. because Intel lucks out to the Z370 boards. So if you're going to look for overclocking, those are still the boards you want to get, though.
Yeah, but most likely if you're buying a Core i3 or a Celeron, or
Yeah, you're not.
Or this is I swear to God, see they always slipping stuff in. This new Pentium G5600, which is a 2-core 4-thread 39 clock, brand new, $86. I suspect that is, of course, a Coffee Lake part, right? Which is, for the most part, just a KB Lake. But yeah, look at they just slipped in a bunch of new Pentiums here.
See, maybe I just haven't been paying attention to the PC world much, but I haven't heard Celeron and Pentium, I feel like, in a long time myself.
Well,
It's like,
just
what
there.
year are we in?
Yeah.
They're really good parts, right? For
They
what
don't
they
get
are.
heavy marketing, but if you buy a sub $500 PC, that's what you're going to get in them, unless you get an AMD APU.
Right. And you're getting very decent clocks. You're getting dual core, right? So,
Right.
all right. Should we take some questions from the audience?
So, yeah, no major questions, but I will say there are a lot of comments that say this is the best PC show ever. Adam's watching, so I don't know if he gets that normally or if it's just because I'm hosting today. So,
Is he looking at you sitting in that seat going, gosh?
yeah,
So when Adam's here, it's like the full nerd, but with Dan here, it's like full nerd plus.
Full nerd plus.
That's true. This is
You're
the boosted,
right.
the super boosted version.
So wait, there must be a question from Adam Patrick Murray. He's probably asking like, did I leave my Cheetos on the desk there? Is that no?
Well, he left other junk around. He wasn't signed fully in. But yeah, so what is our next topic?
So the next topic is, of course, Hades Canyon.
Hi,
And,
everybody.
we had Mark instant puff himself into Elena.
Yeah, he took a shave. He shaved real
Shave.
quick.
Yes. Other big news. Holy smokes, there's just so much Intel news these days.
I haven't even managed to wrap my brain around everything that was announced today.
It's crazy. But the cool thing, though, that last week Elena covered is Hades Canyon. We have them right in front of us. For those who have
Ta-da!
never seen it, these are basically the first one. Of course, I'm going to date myself. The first one is a VHS size cassette tape. Like that's what the original Skull Canyon was last year, right?
No, Skull Canyon was 2016.
Oh,
So this
geez.
is the predecessor to Hades Canyon right here.
Right.
Much smaller. I actually weighed them. I think this one is about half the weight of this one. So this one's like ultra book laptop weight. So it's like 2 pounds, 13 point something ounces.
Wow.
And then this one's about half of that.
Huh.
It's
That's
dense.
still nothing.
It's
2
really
pounds.
dense in the hand.
But I will say one one will smoke the other, right?
Yeah,
'Cause
we've come
this-
a long way in
This
2
has
years.
Iris. It doesn't even have Iris Plus. Doesn't have Iris Pro because
It's Iris Pro. So this was the best you could get in integrated graphics at the time. Probably arguably still probably the best you can get integrated graphics now.
Yeah.
They haven't really pushed the Pro line in a
They
while.
just did. They just in
or
fact
did they? See,
just
I haven't gotten up to date yet today.
today they
I'm
also
super
announced.
behind.
We're not going to talk about it too much, but at that 28 watt TDP point, they also introduced the Iris Plus lineup. 28 watts. Embedded, ED RAM, but they've also said, hey, these are 128 gig ED RAM parts or 128 megabyte ED RAM parts. So they're the spiritual replacement of that.
That'll be
Iris.
interesting.
They're
See
also
how
what-
they do then.
Yeah, and they usually go into classic MacBook Pro, right? That's a classic chip for the MacBook Pro. So Iris Plus. But nobody cares about that. We want to know about
want
the
Katy Lake
Hades
G?
Canyon.
Yeah. So
That's got a real part in there.
yeah. So this is a little different than the chips you've been discussing earlier in the show. This one has. It's basically the Intel equivalent of an AMD APU. So you have both the CPU component and a GPU component in a single package. As everybody knows, this is AMD or Intel Heart AMD pairing.
Yes.
So inside we have Radeon. Let me see if I get this right. Radeon RX Vega M graphics.
GL or GH.
Right. And so there's 2 versions of Hades Canyon. Last time for Skull Canyon, there was only just the one, and it only had the Iris Pro 580 integrated graphics. And then this time, Hades Canyon has two configurations. We had the higher end config, the gaming version, which has the Core i7 8809G inside. So that's a quad core, roughly 45 watt H part equivalent for the CPU side of things. Let's see, base clock is 3.1 gigahertz, turbos up to 4.2, which is a pretty good spread, I think.
Right.
And it's actually a little bit more than some of the 4-core H parts when I was looking at the charts
really?
this morning. Yeah, it looks like their base clock is a little lower, like 2.6 for the 4. And even for the 6 cores, it's lower, but 6 cores is a little different beast anyway.
All right.
And then the Radeon side of things, you have, let's see, it's the Vega M GH part. So that one is 24 compute units. They're running at 1063 megahertz base and then 1190 megahertz for boost.
Okay. I'm sorry.
And
What
then
was
it
the
comes
boost
with-
on the CPU?
On the CPU side, boost is 4.2.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
It's like
it's
an
a higher-
8750H.
It's also a higher base clock, though. That's what I was saying.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's a higher base clock. Good solid, like 500 or 600 megahertz higher.
Oh really? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, what is that, 2.5?
So the 8750H is 2.2, and the 8850H, which is going to be used in most laptops, is 2.6.
Yeah,
So-
so roughly about 500.
But of course, base clocks.
Yeah, I mean,
You
doesn't matter as much these days since it looks like a lot of laptops will hold kind of between base and
Yeah.
turbo these days.
Yeah, and the better the laptop, the better the cooling, and
Yeah.
so it's running at higher clocks.
Yeah, so, gosh, I don't even know where to start in terms of performance. Do we want to talk about
Well, real
all the parts inside? Do we talk
Yeah.
about performance?
Is it a butt kicking between the Iris Pro and the?
Oh, I mean, yeah. I mean, you're talking about integrated graphics versus discrete. Oh, I don't know if I mentioned it's 4 gigs of HBM2 memory in here for the GPU side.
You said there's a question, Dan?
Yeah, so we have a couple of questions. First, Enigma on Twitch is saying, does it include a power cord?
Oh, yeah. So
Oh my God! See, now people don't know what that
This is
reference
hilarious.
is. so.
No, this is hilarious because even though I don't get the reference, I actually literally asked Gordon, I was like, should I bring the power bricks? He's like, sure, why not? So I've just, as you can see, I have them sitting in my lap. It is a 230 watt power brick
Can I see
for
the-
Hades.
Wow.
That looks
Skull
the
Canyon?
size of the Nook itself.
Can I see the?
Is that another Nook?
So this is the original. So for people audio listeners, I'm holding up the previous Skull Canyon, and the power brick for the Hades Canyon is almost the same size as the actual Skull Canyon.
It'll be tucked behind your desk.
So, and then people don't understand that joke. So, longtime Nook users will get it. So, I swear to God, I'm not making this up. I ain't
Oh,
making
that's
this
right.
up.
They didn't include the
The
power
original
cable.
Nook, you got the Nook,
Forgot.
you got the power brick. You didn't get this. Right?
Yeah, you didn't get the Mickey
You
Mouse.
did not get the 25-cent cable. And I was like,
Totally forgot.
I got my review unit way back, and it's like, hey, it didn't come with a power cable. Like, oh, well, we figured you had one. It's like, well, yeah, but I mean, that's not okay. I mean,
Yeah, so you had to buy the Mickey Mouse adapter part, so you actually plug it into the wall. I totally forgot about that.
yes, that was
Man.
the old school reference to that burn on the original Nook.
Wow.
I think that when they came out with the second iteration, they were like, hey, Gordon, guess what? We're throwing in the cable.
Ooh.
All right, I'm buying the Escalade now. I wasn't going to buy it. You give me the floor mats. I'll take it. I will take. That's it. It's the whole floor mats thing.
You should get a special thanks in the user manual.
You should, right?
Shout out.
I had to walk off the
Gordon
lot though.
Memorial.
You walk
power
off the
cable.
lot. Oh, this. So, what can you really play on the Hades Canyon? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, basically,
At what
I mean,
resolution?
people on Twitch and YouTube are asking, who is this for?
So, I think that this is going to be for people who are very much space constrained and for whatever reason don't necessarily want to go with a laptop. So, honestly speaking, this is more expensive as a bare bones system because it only comes as a bare bones system unless you buy it from like a reseller who's like kitted it out. And so you're paying $1,000 for this bare bones system. And then once you throw in your SSD and your RAM, given prices nowadays,
And your OS.
and in your OS, given the prices nowadays for those components, I roughly estimated our review unit, which came pre-equipped with everything, to be about $1,500 out the
Whoa.
door. It's pretty expensive. And I mean, that puts you into gaming laptop territory already.
Yeah.
So I would say that this is for somebody who's not planning to travel much with it, or they're definitely traveling between places that have monitor, keyboard, mouse setup. And for whatever reason, they just want a really compact desktop system that they can, open up, configure a little bit more. One of the things that Gordon and I talked about, in addition to being just, standard gaming PC, in terms of, Intel's marketing, they also are touting this as a VR system. So Gordon and I were talking about how, like, if you could find some kind of external battery source, you could potentially set up your own backpack VR experience with this.
Right.
Other than that, I think that the kind of the group that this would appeal to is actually a bit smaller than Skull Canyon, which was one of the factors that played into my overall evaluation and score ultimately.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a very niche use, right? For practical gaming.
Yeah,
use.
and it's a little harder to justify. I honestly think that this is more of a showpiece for Kaby Lake G than anything else. Just to, kind of say like, hey, like this is what you can do with this chip, because when we reviewed Skull Canyon, or when I reviewed Skull Canyon almost 2 years ago, the mini PC market was pretty uneven in what you could get. It was mostly focused on like mainstream applications. So a lot of like mobile chips, not a lot of, discrete graphic models. And now the landscape's different. So like Zotac and Gigabyte have, 1060, 1070, even 1080 models. I mean, obviously the 1070, 1080 models are going to be bigger than this. But if you're looking for still small form factor that takes a relatively small footprint, you can get that with more power if you want to.
Right.
So, and I think when Kaby Lake G was first announced, they said that they plan on selling this to partners as well to make other PCs, maybe a MacBook, who knows. So I wouldn't be surprised if this was priced slightly higher to do just what you say, show off how much butt it kicks, and then they can still sell it to Dell or Zotac, and they can make a little PC like that, and Intel won't undercut them on pricing.
Right. So I guess maybe a little akin to the whole like NVIDIA Founders Edition cards in that regard.
Perfect.
Maybe not quite so much of a premium, but similar, as you were saying, Brad.
Right, and so the competing Nook style things would be cheaper. I mean, we have seen that, right? Because we saw Nooks from Asus and Gigabyte before, and the like. So, and it is crazy. I gotta say, I wonder if there's like a digital signage use, because it is insane.
So this is
with
like
the outputs.
insane with the ports, right? So because it's about, I would say maybe roughly 1.5 times the height of Skull Canyon, they are able to cram a ton more ports on here. I'm not sure if you can see it from the camera angle being so far away, but we have 6 total USB Type A ports. One is a 3.1, the rest are 3.0. We have, let's see, is it 1 or 2? Oh, it's one USB-C, standard USB-C port for... I
thought 2 Thunderbolts.
Well, and
two Thunderbolt 3s.
There's 2 Thunderbolt 3s in the back, but there's just a standard
right.
one in the front. You have 2 gigabit Ethernet ports. You have 2 mini display ports. You have 2 HDMI ports, standard HDMI, not like the mini HDMI like you would find on those like little square.
Where's the other?
Yeah, one on the front, one on the back. And there's still an SD card reader. So pretty much you're not going to be wanting for ports on this, which I guess is a small bump in its favor over, say, like a gaming laptop. So if you're looking for an application that requires a lot of monitor output, this is definitely the machine for you, because they were telling me this supports up to 6 4K monitors simultaneously.
Right.
It's 5 at 60 hertz and then the remaining one at 30 hertz.
Oh, so I mean, the classic use case scenarios here is day traders, right? You see them in Wall Street with 6 big giant panels. Is there
or
making
trade
tons of
shows
money?
Or whatever. Yeah.
You could see
How does
that.
a game? That's my question. How does a game?
I forgot. There's 2 separate audio jacks too. One supports digital audio, so Toslink, and the other
I
one
think
is
it's
just
loaded.
Yeah, it's super loaded, and apparently it has some kind of fancy microphone array on there too. Is it being
near field? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. She's not going to tell you, Brad. She's just teasing you.
Just teasing
Everybody wants to know how well.
Okay, so gaming, right? This is where we want to start. Which is I asked earlier. I was like, should I start with performance? And I was like, no. Let's answer some questions.
Well,
and talk
it builds
about
up the suspense.
Okay, so to keep with the suspense, I'll start with the older games first.
How old?
Tomb Raider, 2013.
All right.
Going back, 5 years now? So I ran Tomb Raider on Ultimate at 1080p, because this is pretty much a 1080p system. And I got locked in, that benchmark locked in right above the 60 frames per second mark on Ultimate, which for a game that old, I wasn't super impressed, but as we both know, or we all know here, Tomb Raider tends to be a little more CPU dependent or influenced by the CPU performance. So, one thing I didn't mention yet, which was, so you know how earlier I mentioned that the CPU is roughly equivalent to a 45 watt part? That's because the entire package is rated at a TDP of 100 watts. But there's what they call, I think, dynamic tuning going on, which means that depending on whatever CPU and GPU load is happening at the time, they will dynamically manage how much power is being drawn by each. And so the explanation for that is a little complicated, but essentially it's just to make sure you can get the most performance out of each side.
Right.
Makes sense.
But given that in a game you're going to be tapping both, I wonder if that's honestly what's happening with Tomb Raider, which is why we're not seeing even higher frame rate.
Because it's loading both of them up, so
Yeah,
one of them's being cut back.
right. So Tomb Raider, about 60 frames per second. Going forward in time, Shadow of Mordor, 64 frames per second on Ultra with the 4K texture pack on.
Oh.
Not terrible.
It's pretty good. I mean, still. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it's still an older game. It's almost 4 years now.
okay.
4 years.
But still. I mean, we haven't come that.
3.5.
There's any other game stuff? I mean,
Yeah.
what?
So I'm going forward in time.
Oh.
So Rise of the Tomb Raider on very high DX11, so not DX12, about 51 frames per second on very high, which is pretty good. I think
That's really decent.
that game's pretty.
That is really decent.
This to
intense.
me, this is all impressing the heck out of me for a thing in a box that small.
Yeah. It bodes well when we start to see KB Lake G laptops, right? And then going even more forward, Shadow of War, so Middle Earth Shadow of War, which is the newer game, the sequel to Shadow of Mordor. So I cranked everything up, put it on Ultra. That got only mid-30s, 34 frames per second. If you drop it down to high, it goes about to mid-40s. And then I think if you drop it down again to whatever they call it, normal or medium, then it's mid-50s. So it's kind of, at that point, it's just kind of based on how pretty you really want the game to be.
Oh, okay. I really have not used that gamer for much testing. Do you think it's something where the 4 gigs of HBM2 is kind of a limiting factor, or just simply the GPU
I
itself,
haven't
right?
poked around to that game much.
Okay.
Not yet.
Yeah.
That's-
I mean, I just put it on the machine just so we could see how it does in very new games, because that only came out in October, so it's still a very contemporary
I wouldn't
game.
be surprised if at Ultra textures might make a difference, and that might be the 4 gigabytes HBM that's bumping into. But I mean, I personally wouldn't necessarily go into this machine expecting to play the newest games on Ultra settings with it. So I think this all sounds respectful to me still.
No, I think I agree, but I just like to know how it does, and I just wanted to show that you can play
Sure.
newer games.
How did it do in PUBG?
That womps on the console experience, 34 frames per second.
Brad, console's $200. Wait a minute.
Speaking of, this does support FreeSync because it's an AMD part inside.
Okay.
I forgot to mention that too.
Did you test it on the Bayonetta?
I did not test it on the Bayonetta, but I did fire up PUBG at Gordon's behest.
I just want to know.
So I have to, I did this in the review video, and I have to preface it again here. I have never played PUBG before benchmarking this system. And as a result, I don't think necessarily my experience will be a locked in indication of your experience when you play on this machine, because I kept wandering the edges forever trying to find where the action was.
And then you died suddenly? Is that what happened?
Yeah, I stayed out.
So that's exactly what everybody does.
Well,
in
no,
PUBG.
but I stayed out not because someone killed me. Although at one point someone was firing at me, and I was like, man, you're a really bad shot, because I can hear the bullets whizzing by me and you still haven't killed me yet. And then I wandered away.
That's PUBG. Yeah, okay.
And then No, I died because I just was out in the blue zone too long.
That
Or-
happens too. That's PUBG. Yeah, that's definitely.
It's like, oh, I'm stuck here again. Well, I guess I'm just expiring in about 3 seconds.
Well, how did it?
So
what kind of
okay,
frame
so too much suspense here. Okay, so I left it on high
Okay.
because I knew that this game has weird performance spikes, right? And I got 55 frames per second each
Okay.
time I was wandering aimlessly in the hinterlands.
So,
But I don't know what it's going to do if you're in the middle of, like, 5 people suddenly pop up out of a building and, are all shooting randomly at each other. So you could I would anticipate some kind of frame rate drop at that point, just given what I know about this game's performance.
yeah, although it is very CPU dependent, right? I mean, a lot of people say.
Yeah, but that would also possibly kick in the balancing issues that she was talking about earlier. But
Yeah.
that's 55 frames per second out in the woods. That's great for you couldn't get that for the first 6 months that game was in early access.
I gotta say, in the APU, it wasn't on the Ryzen APU. Definitely was. We were looking at, 720 maybe. It was really tough. I mean, I could play it. It wasn't the greatest. It kind of looked like a watercolor at some point, but it just that's definitely more. This is packing a lot more power. Of course, it costs a lot more too. So
Yeah,
What
quite
would
a
you
bit
equate
more.
this to as far as laptop graphics options? Like, is it
Oh.
like a 730? Is it a 1080? What is it?
According to what I was able to dig up, so I ended up comparing this in our benchmark charts to a lot of the laptops we reviewed, just because it felt like the closest equivalent were mobile parts.
It makes sense.
And so for laptop side of things, it fell roughly between a GTX 1050 Ti and a GTX 1060, but a little bit more towards the 1060 side. So in that fairly big gulf between those two parts, it's a little bit more towards the 1060 performance.
1060 full tilt or 1060
No,
max
sorry,
Q?
Max Q.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I almost
okay.
forgot to add
That's
that.
really good, actually. That's a lot better than I expected that graphics chip to do.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think they were originally at CES. They were saying you'll get near 1060 Max Q performance, kind of.
And that's pretty much where it clocks in. So I would agree with that assessment. The going back to the whole, who would buy this question though, because I've seen what was it, that MSI 1060 laptop that we really liked last year. Those were hitting around that $1,500 mark if you found it on sale. That's why I think it's kind of a harder proposition to say oh, this appeals to everybody, just because you can get something that's portable for roughly the same price with
it
rough,
includes a
similar
monitor.
performance.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
you get a monitor, speakers, and a keyboard and mouse
Right.
with it. So it's
Right. So it's going to be really a very specific group of people that are going to find this super appealing. Oh, one thing you can't see because it's not plugged in is that this is just for fun entertainment purposes, but Skull Canyon has this skull etched into the lid, which is removable and replaceable. Same thing here. You can replace the lid if you want, but if you stick with the stock one, which looks plain here, there's actually a glowing RGB LED skull that shows up once you plug it in, and it's customizable, so you can change it to different colors if you like.
Really?
Yeah.
Does it do patterns or just simply color?
No,
at
it's
this
also
point?
patterned, so it has breathing and strobing.
Oh,
There's
nice.
3 different presets you can choose from. It's not really complicated, but it's a reason to keep it visible as opposed to just mounting it with the included VESA bracket on the back of your monitor.
Wow.
So Mattman on YouTube and Raphael on Facebook both are basically asking the same question. What is the upgradability as far as video goes? Can you add an external GPU via Thunderbolt?
Yes, it does support that. So you have 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports on the back. Both are by 4 Thunderbolt 3. We've confirmed that. So it should very much support doing external graphics.
Can you run 2 external GPUs in SLI or
SLI.
Crossfire, Brad?
That's a case where I would do it just because.
I did not ask that, but that's definitely a question worth asking at some point.
Yeah, I'm sure it wouldn't because NVIDIA does lock stuff too. But I suppose you could do it with Crossfire. 2 external Radeons, and then those are bridgeless. Those are bridgeless, right? So you could.
Yeah.
Provided you can get your hands on some, sure.
That'd be tough though. Squeezing
That
it
makes
all through.
that makes the value proposition even more because you got to buy the external graphics dock and then the graphics card to go in it, and then
Yeah.
a Thunderbolt 3 cable.
Yeah. But it means that you're not limited to just whatever's inside. So you can always, get some more life out of this down the road if you really want to.
And especially because something I don't think we talked about, but really jumped out to me reading your review, I was actually really impressed with how the CPU side handled. Because like the high-end gaming laptops right now have a 7700Q, and they all perform generally the same. And this thing, it looked like stomped it. So it has a pretty powerful CPU. So if, a few years down the line, you could hook up an external graphics card and still have a pretty banging system, I think.
Yeah, it does pretty well. Like one of my things that I like to do when I test is to fire up Handbrake, which is basically something that hammers on the CPU because you're doing a transcode between we do like a conversion between a large MKV file down to a smaller MP4 file. And I usually like to let that run just to see how if it throttles, what clock speed it ends up hanging out at when it all heats up. And this one locked in right away at 3.9 gigahertz and just stayed there rock solid the whole time during the Handbrake encode.
Yeah, what's actually really interesting about this whole design too, because you remember you have the GPU and the memory for it, and the CPU on the same package, right? That EMIB package. So as you're saying, they can share 100 watts. Intel said, like, look, when the GPU doesn't need all the power, we push more to the CPU, right? So it almost sounds like they can exceed 45 watts for the CPU because they can monitor it very closely, right? Say, hey, we can take more from the GPU. This is not a GPU load. Run the CPU at a higher clock. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool, but why can't you do that in a traditional gaming laptop with discrete graphics? It's like, because just give them more power. They're like, well, if we gave people that capability, we'd be worried they would break something. So if you actually then ran your
it's
CPU
fair.
up at a higher, and I, you kind of wonder, like, are they just trying to lock people into the EMIB? But it's a valid concern, right? Because you don't want people to nuke their laptop because you did some mistake or something. And
Yeah. I will say one of the interesting things about the fact that everything's on the same package was looking at power draw. So another thing I like to do is to just kind of see what the max power draw is on these mini PCs, because I feel like if you're looking at a mini PC, you may actually also be concerned about how much power you're consuming. Otherwise, why wouldn't you just get like a big desktop, right?
Right.
So the Skull Canyon, partially because it does also have integrated graphics, the component that drew the most, I can't speak today, that drew the most power during testing was the CPU. So I ran Prime 95 and that was the highest. On this one, it was during actual gaming, not even when I ran FurMark. Like FurMark, I think it topped out at maybe 160 something watts.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's still
Still a
not,
lot,
it's a
pretty
lot,
good.
but I mean, you're talking
Yeah.
about discrete graphics. But it was during an actual gaming benchmark where it hit the top. My top recorded one, I think, is in the high or mid to high 170s. But at one point, I actually did see 180s informally while testing.
Wow. Okay.
So there's something going on when both of them are fired up, CPU and GPU are fired up, that it just really pulls in that extra.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be interesting to run. Did you run Prime 95 with FurMark? Because that'd be like
No, not at the
blow
same
it up,
time. But I
kinda like-
could. I mean, I could try. Now that I'm actually done with the review. Well, I'm actually not done. I'm trying to do some of the overclocking. I didn't get to that in time for my review.
Yeah, and it is an unlocked part, right? So that's,
It is an unlocked part. So you can, and it's not just the CPU side of thing. You can overclock the CPU, the GPU, the HBM2 memory, and the actual RAM if you so choose.
Yeah, and I think the guidance from Intel was like their lab guys, in general, you could sort of expect an all-core overclock on this thing of like 4.6.
I thought
Hey.
it was 4.7.
It was like,
Yeah.
damn, that's pretty good though.
So
right?
I mean, it depends what silicon you get, right?
I mean,
How you fare in the lottery.
yeah, it's always, that's why it's never guaranteed, but they're saying in general, you could expect like above 4.5, 4.6. That's pretty damn good, right?
Yeah,
That's-
but they also caution, they are very clear about this in the reviewer guidelines, is that because it's a shared package, you're going to have to be very careful about how you overclock it. depending on your use case. So I'm pretty sure that 4.6 or 4.7 is CPU only kind of task where like all you're focusing on is just like your handbrake style encodes.
Right.
Like if you're trying to coax a lot out of this for gaming, I don't think you're getting nearly that much.
Yeah.
It's like that with the Ryzen APUs too. The new Ryzen APUs, like you can overclock both segments of it, but if you want to game a bunch, ignore the CPU. Don't waste your time there. Crank the GPU.
And I do wonder.
It steals from each other.
Yeah, I do wonder if you sort of get less graphics performance if you're really running a higher CPU overclock, right? Because then they go like, oh, we need to put the entire power budget to the CPU. So
it'll be interesting to see. I'm not sure how much time I have to spend on overclocking, so we'll see how far I get with it.
And I'm also interested to see how they're sort of partitioning power for what device. Like if they let you, I should mess around with it, but did they let you go like, I want to give priority to the GPU or priority to the CPU for overclock for power in general? So.
I haven't dug into it yet.
Okay.
So I think we have time for one last question.
Oh, okay.
And Elvis is live on YouTube and is asking, how does this compare to computers like the Spark from Digital Storm?
Oh.
So mini PCs or tiny PCs.
Right.
Yeah, I'm the only one here who has seen both of them. I got to say, well, the Spark is custom water-cooled 8700K with a 1060 and an MXM module. So it'll smoke this because it's liquid-cooled, but it's also
larger, though.
It's larger. It's probably about twice, about 2x, 2.3x the size in for pure volume over it. So for pure gaming performance, the Spark, and I think, gosh, they had a 1080 there, right? They, because it's liquid cooled, they can really get a lot out of it.
What's the price tag on that one again?
I think it was started at $1,500 for a 1060 part. One issue I will say with the Spark, the entire concept, which I like, and I like a lot of the MXM module based devices, is everything I hear, NVIDIA is kind of moving away from MXM modules, so it may be harder to get MXM module kind of mini computers in the future. I have directly asked NVIDIA that, and they said, no, we still support MXM too. So I don't know. There's concern that they're not going to be able to source MXM, and then NVIDIA says, no, we're still going to support it. Who knows, right? So I think we are right at the end here, though.
Right.
Are we right on time again? Yes.
If anybody has further questions about Hades Canyon, feel free to tweet at me. I'm happy to answer them.
And then
One thing that I think that's cool about that Hades Canyon is, and Kaby Lake G, is that it uses the Radeon settings software, like to update your graphics drivers and whatnot, but it's all branded Intel Blue.
Can you change that color?
I don't know. She has it. I haven't touched it.
No, I'm just wondering if it's like customizable, because like that, I know like for some AMD people, they get angry it's red. In the old days, it was green though, so people don't forget that.
So much confusion.
Color, everybody's got to pick their primary color for their product. It was a dark green, but that's where NVIDIA's in that light green. So anyway, I'm going to take us out before we go over too much. We will see you next week. Check back again in 1 week for your hot fix of PC Talk on the Full Nerd. For audio listeners, subscribe to us on iTunes. Leave us a review every time you do. Intel or AMD adds another Core 2 CPU. Also, you can get us on Google Play or Stitcher. Send questions and comments to thefullnerd@pcworld.com. I'm Gordon Maong with Brad Charkis.
Adios.
Mark Hoffman, who is here, but he's leaving. And Elena Yee.
Bye, everyone.
And Dan will take us out.
That's me. Goodbye, everyone.
Like 1 hour. Damn.